May I begin, Rabbi, commending you for your leadership in the organizing of this timely and significant and compelling international conference, respecting Russia's international crimes against Ukraine. I regret only that I'm unable to be with you in person and to benefit not only from the presentations in their depth and breadth, but from the personal encounters that make such a gathering so resonant. The theme of the report, which I'll be sharing with you, is the report jointly published by the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and the New Lines Institute, respecting the Russia's breaches of the Genocide Convention in Ukraine and the corresponding responsibility, obligation to prevent and protect against a genocide. This report, the first of its kind, which was published toward the end of May 2022, has benefited from consultations with and contributions from distinguished scholars of genocide and international law, from intelligence assessments, linguists who assisted us in the examination of the evidence. And as you've mentioned, Ravi, the principal author is Yonah Diamond, legal advisor at the Wallenberg Center and a member of this panel. The report has also benefited from extensive work that, for example, the Wallenberg Center has done on the issue of genocide. This is not the first report of its kind that we published, also with the New Lines Institute. We did a very comprehensive report with respect to the mass atrocities constituting acts of genocide targeting the Uyghurs, the Xinjiang region of China. I might add that as a result of that report and its analysis by Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Human Rights of the Canadian Parliament, this led the Canadian Parliament to become the first parliament to make a determination that these acts targeting the Uyghurs constitute acts of genocide, which has subsequently been followed by other parliaments. Indeed, the determinations here with respect to genocide made by a Canadian-based NGO, by a Canadian parliament, are also anchored in important principles and precedents of the Supreme Court of Canada in this regard. I will reference just two. The first was a trilogy of cases decided by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1990, known generically here as the Keekstra cases et al., in which the court made a determination affirming the constitutionality of Canada's anti-hate legislation and incitement, prohibition of incitement to genocide, and made the following remarks in support of its conclusion. The court said that, and I quote, "The Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. It began with words. This, as the court put it, are the catastrophic effects of racism. This, as the court put it, are the chilling facts of history." In a second judgment, in what has come to be known as the Mugasera case, actually one in which I participated in as an intervener, then the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, the court held that the very incitement to genocide constitutes a violation of the Genocide Convention, whether or not acts of genocide follow. Mr. Mugasera had come to Canada in 1992. He sought refugee status. the genocide targeting the Tutsis in Rwanda occurred, as you know, in 1994. In the course of those refugee proceedings and other appellate review proceedings, I won't go into it. The case came before the Supreme Court of Canada where he was being prosecuted with regard to the crime of incitement to genocide. And Mr. Mugesera said, well, how could I have been prosecuted for this crime? I came to Canada in 1992. The genocide in Rwanda occurred in 1994. I wasn't even there. And the court made the determination that his direct and public incitement to genocide in his involvement in Radio Kalina and the like constituted a breach and violation of the Genocide Convention itself. It is a stand-alone crime and thereby was held accountable. Accordingly, may I summarize briefly against this backdrop the three principal conclusions of this report. First, that Russia is responsible for direct and public incitement to genocide, which, as I mentioned, is a standalone crime and breach of the convention. Second, that Russia is responsible for patterns of mass atrocity crimes, including war crimes and crimes against humanity, from which can be inferred an intent to destroy Ukrainians as a protected national group under the Genocide Convention. And third, that the ongoing mass atrocity crimes resulting from the unprovoked crime of aggression, underpinned by the direct and public incitement to genocide, establish a serious risk of genocide, thereby mandating and obliging all state parties to the Genocide Convention to prevent and protect. I would add, though the report does not expressly make this finding or recommendation, that the ongoing, unprovoked crime of aggression in the Ukraine mandates, in my view, and others have mentioned this, the need to establish an independent special tribunal for the crime of aggression. This remedy is not now available under the other remedies that we have been speaking of, whether we refer to the ICC or ICJ and the like. This is a recommendation, in fact, that I've been involved in along with Hans Karel and David Crane. We've produced a white paper for this purpose, as have others. And actually, later today, I'm participating in a forum, particularly to seek to advance this recommendation. May I elaborate briefly on each of these principal findings? The first, where I mentioned that Russia is engaged and in the crime of the incitement to genocide, prohibited, as I mentioned, as a standalone crime under the Genocide Convention. This is, the report underpins this with broad-based evidence, and I'll just, in a series of one-liners, summarize those evidence. The first are the repeated denials by Russian authorities at the highest levels of the very existence of a Ukrainian people, of the very existence of a Ukrainian identity. The ongoing dehumanization and demonization by state officials, orchestrated state incitement, summed up really in the ongoing use of the need to denazify the Ukraine, used as a justification for the invasion to begin with, and as an ongoing justification respecting the mass atrocities that are continuing. A third is what has come to be known as the false accusation in the mirror, a powerful, historically recurring form of incitement when the perpetrator, in this instance, Russia, accuses the protected group, in this instance, the Ukrainians, of themselves perpetrating the very genocidal acts that the perpetrator himself is engaged in. There is also the ongoing characterization of Ukraine and Ukrainians as an existential threat to Russia, not unlike, and references made to this in report documents this again and again, of Nazi Germany's existential threat at the time, and where Putin on May 8th, 2022, fully reported in a report, I reference this in particular, I remember it, it happens to be my birthday, May 8th, one day before, of course, of Russia's celebration of its victory day over the Nazis. Putin sent a telegram to Russian-backed separatists claiming that Russians, quote, are fighting for the liberation of their native land from the Nazi filth, a kind of ongoing metaphor and message of incitement, and vowing that victory will be ours like it was in 1945, with the Russians thereby further reinforcing its crime of aggression through the demonizing and dehumanizing Nazi metaphors. Second point, and move more quickly. Second finding, what distinguishes genocide from other mass atrocity crimes is the intent to destroy in whole or in part a protected group, as such as Ukrainians are under the Genocide Convention. This intent can be inferred from the evidence of a general state plan, that is to say, statements by officials, documents, policies, all of which are documented in the report, or from a systematic pattern of mass atrocity crimes targeting the protected group, which the report documents and which include, and again in a series of findings, mass killings, as in the well-documented Bucha massacre and the graphic murders there, deliberate attacks on shelters, on humanitarian corridors, on evacuation routes and the like, indiscriminate bombing of residential areas using cluster munitions and prohibited weapons as we speak and taking place as we speak, deliberate and systematic imposition of life-threatening conditions, destruction of vital infrastructure, again happening as we meet, whether we speak of the mass targeting of water, power, communication facilities, medical facilities, the ongoing attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure, including also on food and energy supplies and the like. In other words, targeting the basic necessities of life that underpin civilian life and infrastructure, and intended to bring about the physical destruction of the targets. Rape and sexual violence accompanied by the direct and public incitement to genocide, forcible transfer of Ukrainians, including hundreds of thousands of the children, itself an act-specific mass atrocity constitutive of genocide and the like, which brings me to the third and last finding, that this criminal aggression, this direct and public incitement to genocide, this pattern of mass atrocities that I've described, the whole evidence of an intent to destroy the Ukrainians as a protected group have created a serious risk of genocide, and thereby the duty of state parties to the Genocide Convention to protect and prevent this genocide when a serious threshold has been reached, and as the report documents, such a serious risk of genocide and threshold has been reached, and therefore mandates state obligation to prevent and protect, to undertake the necessary actions to protect the vulnerable and targeted Ukrainian protected community. itself a standalone legal obligation, an obligation that under the Genocide Convention is triggered before the genocide occurs. And when the threshold of the risk of that genocide has occurred, the mandate and obligation to prevent is thereby triggered against the backdrop of all that I've mentioned, including, as I said, the unprovoked criminal act of aggression, the direct and public incitement to genocide, the mass atrocities, war crimes, and crimes against humanity themselves constitutive of acts of genocide graphically documented in the report, the whole thereby creating a serious risk of genocide and mandating the responsibility to prevent and protect. In a word, this report then and your discussions now and all that has happened since the end of May when we published our report have only served to further underscore the risk of genocide and to further underscore a call of action on all state parties to undertake their responsibilities to prevent this genocide. Thank you.